Welcome to CinemaSpection. I'm Tim.
I'm Agatha.
Tonight we're discussing what is arguably one of the most important horror films ever made. A film that pushed the boundaries of what could be shown on screen, injected sharp, cynical social commentary about race, gender, and social disorder into the genre, and forever changed the rules for a classic horror archetype, the zombie. So we're presenting a commentary for George A. Romero's groundbreaking feature debut, Night of the Living Dead. Okay, so Agatha, before we get into the actual commentary itself, what's your history with this movie?
Much like just about every classic film, I have no idea when I saw it for the first time. It's just always been there.
This is one I remember it was almost kind of held over me as a threat by some of the adults in my life as a kid, like, oh, we're going to put on Night of the Living Dead. Are you ready for that? And as a kid, I was terrified about everything. That, to me, was like, oh, no, don't do that.
Was it your uncle?
No, it was actually a friend of my dad's.
Oh, well.
But I do remember when I finally did see it, I had borrowed a VHS copy from my dad. It was a Good Times tape that had this and Reefer Madness. And I was like, all right, I think I'm finally ready for this. Before that, I had seen little clips of it in this horror VCR game called Doorways to Horror. Mm-hmm. It didn't get into the gruesome stuff, but it kind of prepared me for what it was going to look like.
Right.
And finally seeing it, I was just completely blown away by it. I remember the ending that we're going to get into in detail later. It was so horrific, it actually made me burst out loud laughing. I just couldn't believe the audacity of the filmmakers to include that ending.
I love how mine is, oh, I don't know, it's always been around. And you had this very clear memory of the events that led to you finally seeing Night of the Living Dead.
One could argue that might mean that even as a kid, I needed to get a life.
Oh.
So before we get into it, a couple facts about Night of the Living Dead. The movie was released by Continental Films for the Walter Reed Organization on October 1st, 1968. Amazingly, when it sort of toured drive-ins in the area, it was paired with Doctor Who and the Daleks. That is a weird double feature.
It is, but kind of amazing.
I know. It was shot on a budget of... total costs were somewhere between $114,000 to $125,000 with all the lab costs and everything like that. The box office, officially it's at $30 million, but because of the copyright issues with this movie, the true amount of money it made will never really be known because, of course, they never had to report that once it was in the public domain. Anybody could screen this, and because it played midnight shows for years and years and years, it's impossible to imagine how much this movie probably made overall. It was acquired as part of the Museum of Modern Art's permanent collection in 1980 after a series of screenings that started to turn the tide on its perception as a really important cultural touchstone. And it was actually deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant by the U.S. Library of Congress and entered into the National Film Registry in 1994. Alrighty, are we ready to begin?
We are.
Okay, now... little note about the startup for this one. We normally just, say, pause at a certain point and say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. We're watching the Criterion edition of this, and with that one, there's a lot of messages before the movie starts about the print and the Criterion logo and everything like that. So what I suggest is this. Get your copy, whether it's online, whether it's a cheap DVD, whether it's the Criterion one. Go to the very first frame of the movie. The first shot, when you go frame by frame, go one back behind that. So on the Criterion one, it's at like 42 seconds. So as soon as you hit play, the film will start immediately. Because a lot of different versions of this have different things at the beginning. Just go to that first actual frame of film, and we're going to start there. So we're going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and start. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And interesting, because this is going to be such a claustrophobic movie, this beginning is kind of the farthest away we get from the farmhouse that's going to be the setting for the entire film.
Well, the space is getting smaller and smaller. Now we see they're out there and there's a lot of open air, and then they get to the cemetery, which gets a little smaller, then escaping to the house, which is smaller, then having parts of the house become compromised. So the claustrophobic feeling is literally because the film is getting smaller.
Oh, and this is interesting. These first two shots of the road, it's just the same road from different sides and ends of it. This is like all the way further back from where that other shot was shot.
That's beautifully done.
Yeah, it really kind of lets you stretch it out, and you wouldn't be able to tell otherwise. Now, this movie was made by a group called Image 10 that was formed to produce this one film only, founded by Romero, John Russo, the co-screenwriter, and 8 other investors who all kicked in like $600 to start the production, and then they would get more investors so they could kick it up to $12,000. That was their production costs. A lot of them are people who would work on the movie and act in the movie. And interestingly, you won't really see a credit for music because all of the music in this movie pretty much is from library tracks. That was like the Capitol Records group. They just grabbed a whole bunch of library tracks. It's amazing because it's different composers, music composed at different times that popped up in a lot of other cheap movies, and yet it all feels consistent watching the movie. It feels like one consistent score. Romero would use library tracks in a bunch of his movies for quite a while, too, all the way up to Creepshow, actually. I just love the slow dread of this, these long static shots that just kind of lull you into the movie.
We haven't seen a human yet. We've been told there's a cemetery. We know it's far out into the countryside. So we're being confronted with both beings that are alive and dead. It's like a veil.
I love that George Romero's credit comes over the American flag. That just feels appropriate for a guy who would have so much to say about American culture in his movies. Well, you can see something in the corner of the frame there. I think it was a camera hood.
They ought to make the day the time changes.
Now, I actually looked it up. Now, based on this film premiering in 1968, the film would actually be set on Monday, April 29th, despite the fact that they mention it's a Sunday.
How did you figure that out?
Because she says when the time changes, the day the time changes in 1968 was a Sunday, like early in the morning.
I figure we're either going to have to move.
So actually, probably, I guess it might have been Sunday, April 28th, depending on how you look at it. It's also weird seeing these new cleaned up prints because I'm so used to so many weird jumps in this movie where frames were dropped out.
You know, I don't even remember what the man looks like.
Johnny, it takes you 5 minutes.
They do a great job with the sort of sibling bickering between the two of them.
It's funny because the first time I saw this, I thought they were a married couple. And of course, in dialogue, you find out they absolutely aren't.
Yeah. Oh, and here, if only Johnny had stuck around in the car a little longer to hear what's going on the radio.
You know, Johnny wouldn't have bothered.
That voice on the radio is Carl Hardman, who's going to play Harry Cooper later on in the movie. Everybody in this movie, it seemed like, did double duty.
Well, small budget films, everybody's going to pull their weight.
Oh, yeah. Russell Streiner, who here plays Johnny, was actually the film's producer, and his brother did a lot of the sound work.
There's nothing wrong with the radio. Must have been the station.
Which row is it in?
My God, that tie.
Oh, interesting that he knows and she doesn't. I don't know if he set the plot up or if he's already visited and she's been avoiding it.
The implication I got is that they do this as sort of an annual thing.
So she has forgotten
Yeah.
where it's located?
Well, there's no one around.
It's only them and the dead.
I know.
They only lost an hour's sleep when the time changed.
I think you complain just to hear yourself talk.
Must be weird for whoever's family this stone actually belongs to. We never see the name on it, but, you know, based on the Blair gravestone on the left, you could actually track down which stone this is. I saw pictures of the cemetery, and it's completely different. They actually had a tornado that ripped out a lot of the trees and unearthed a lot of the bodies that had to be reburied.
Ugh.
Creepy.
I wonder what happened to the one from last year. Each year we spend good money on these things. We come out here and the one from last year's gone.
Well, the flowers die. And the caretaker,
I love how Judith O'Dea says that somebody takes them away. It's this kind of childlike tone that's going to come up a lot later on when she
Yes.
goes into shock.
Next year. Wonder how many times we bought the same one.
You know, even her manner of prayer is fairly childlike.
Yeah. Now, the thunder you're going to hear in here and the lightning they're going to use was just because when they were shooting, it started to mist up and they were worried people were going to be able to detect that. So, but what it does is, because they had to put a light right next to Russell Streiner for that shot, you get that really sharp close-up out of nowhere. And it's necessity, but it works really well.
It is disconcerting.
And there's the driving gloves that they wrote in as a signifier for later on when he comes back as a zombie, because without the glasses, it might have been hard to recognize who he was. It was actually a very smart move, because it worked for me as a kid.
Come on.
I haven't seen you in church lately.
Well, not much sense in my going to church. Do you remember one time when we were small?
And already, like you said, we're kind of framing her as a child with this anecdote about her being terrified. And it kind of sets up what her reaction to everything that's going to happen is going to be shocked into basically catatonia. She's so afraid.
Remember that? Right over there. Well, you used to really be scared here.
Still.
Yep.
Johnny,
Well, you're still afraid.
stop it.
And here comes the immortal line.
Anybody got a peanut?
Back coming to get you.
Okay, here's the funny thing. He's kind of doing a Boris Karloff voice Bill Heinzman, who plays this zombie in the background who's coming up, based his walk on Boris Karloff from a movie called The Walking Dead. So you have two actors imitating Karloff in this scene.
Amazing.
There comes one of them now.
Something to note here, Bill Heinzman, when that first shot, as he approaches, his coat is unbuttoned. That's going to change in a bit, which is a little weird. I love how Johnny, despite, making fun of her, immediately jumps to her aid and, does what he can to fight this guy. And Heinzman, besides just having an amazing looking face, he just, as the zombie, he's really scary here. You can see he's trying to bite him and just how frantic he's attacking him.
He does move a lot more quickly than some of the other zombies do later on. He seems more animate.
He does. He can
fresh.
practically chase, yeah. And there was a split second there where Johnny had the upper hand. I've heard a lot of debate about that. Like, shouldn't Johnny not rise as a zombie later because he's had a head wound? But I always imagine maybe he's not even dead there. Maybe he's just unconscious.
It could just be blood loss.
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm making up how he died, but could still come back as a zombie.
Maybe it was a glancing blow, so maybe he's a branch damage zombie. Enough to kill him, not enough to destroy the brain. Oh, that cliche of tripping over nothing, but it works okay here.
Okay, to be fair, she's in high heels, in grass.
Yep.
Falling is perfectly normal with that situation.
And I like that, okay, she's going to be in shock later, but she's actually still thinking pretty clearly here. She knows to lock the door. She knows to hit the emergency brake in a second. The brain is still working. It's in survival mode here.
I like the idea that the keys aren't here, or she isn't thinking to find them. She's only, keep me in, keep it out.
Yeah. And here Bill Heinzman was kind of surprised it didn't break in the first hit, so he hits it hard and actually hit Romero with this brick, supposedly, because Romero was shooting in the front seat.
But also, this zombie uses tools.
I was going to bring that up, yeah.
There's still a level of human intelligence in there. And this is something that we see through the entire zombie run, the Romero one rather, where over time they start to show more and more of what we would think of as human behavior. Yeah,
we're going to see quite a few use tools by the end of this movie as battering rams and clubs and such. Now, this is kind of amazing. The car belonged to Russell Striner's mother, and she had an accident, so they had to write it into the movie, so that's why it comes up against this tree, which was actually pretty brilliant. Because otherwise it was just going to roll to a stop on the hill, but it works so much better that she accidentally drives into the tree. Yeah, he's moving at a pretty good clip.
He really does, and I know that isn't just gravity helping him.
Yeah.
And maybe it does vary by zombie how ambulatory they are.
Yeah. I love this shot. I guess they shot it out of the trunk of a car, and it's...
Oh, beautiful.
Now, the camera work in this, because the camera they used had a blimp, this giant covering that would prevent the noise from infecting it if they wanted to, have sync sound, you'll notice that anytime there's, sound, it's a stable camera on a tripod. Anytime it's handheld, they're not actually recording sound. But the way they do that in the movie and weave it through so you don't notice is really clever. I guess this house no longer exists anymore. It was pretty much leased to the filmmakers because it was going to be demolished, so...
Well, that did allow them to do some pre-demolition on it.
Yeah, it was rented for $300 a month and eventually demolished for a sod farm.
Oh, this is the only house in the area. The car is undrivable. This zombie seems unrelenting and very fast because she did run here.
I guess he wasn't going to play this zombie either. John Russo, the screenwriter, was in makeup to play the zombie, and Heinzman was just happened to be around. So there's stills of Russo helping out with the camera in full zombie makeup while they're filming that scene.
So these are the first few moments where we can really see Barbara starting to be affected by what happened. She is now inside a house, and a house is a safe place to be. They're always thought of as wombs. So now that she's in, all of that shock comes down on her.
And the lighting here that makes this, what would normally be a normal, friendly environment, so strange and alien. And very smartly, first thing she does, she gets a weapon. We never find out the full story of what happened here, and I kind of love that, this mystery of how the woman that we're going to find later ends up on the stairs. Was there somebody else living in the house who had died who attacked her? They had to like furnish this and clean it up and make it look like a livable house, and they did a superb job. And I'm going to spoil it. Coming up here is a kind of a shock jump that still really, really works, partially just because of a great music sting. That long pause before it.
Yeah, that and it's filmed in such a way that you'd never expect anything like that. It's an odd shot to begin with. It's a little too far away for one, it's a little too close for the other, and then the swing up to the animal is just unsettling.
And we don't know that these are zombies yet, but this idea of dead things on the wall, oh, isn't that kind of creepy, is a nice layer.
You collect dead things and put them on walls. Well, now you are dead things.
And she's thinking, oh yeah, call for help. Smart move, but again, she's still pretty active, still thinking. The simplicity of this, that we barely get to know who she is, but we sympathize with her completely. She's been attacked. She's trying to find help. She's trying to find shelter. Just really basic elemental storytelling, and it works so well. We don't have to have a lot of exposition about who she is or what's happening. We're going to discover it along with her.
Still just that one zombie.
And then there's this moment of, oh, two guys, maybe they'll help me. And then she looks at this zombie's reaction, which is not... They're not attacking him. He's not afraid. It's like, oh, whoever they are, they're just like him. Oh, and see, button coat. The coat is buttoned now.
It is notable, by the way, that she is a woman alone, and she's being chased by men.
Yep.
And they're men without any sort of rationality, so she can't reason with them to stop. She just has to run. And because women, like, on a daily basis have to handle the possibility of murder from strange men, and yeah, of course, men too, but it's important to show some really marginalized characters being threatened in a realistic manner.
I got to bring this up. This reveal is amazing because there's that static shot of him, and you're like, is he one of them too? Then as he looks back and runs at her, like, oh my God, is he attacking? No, it's okay. He's normal. I love that quick reveal, that kind of fake shock of, oh my God, he's a zombie too. No. And enter Dwayne Jones, who, oh my God, he's amazing in this. Now, originally, they had a guy who was part of the Image 10 group named Rudy Ricci who was going to play this part. He comes up as a zombie later on, and he would play one of the leaders of the biker gang from Dawn of the Dead in '78. And he wanted to write his novel. He just didn't feel like he could devote enough to it. And eventually they were introduced to Dwayne Jones, who was visiting his family in Pittsburgh, and just thought he was amazing. And they had to rewrite the part to fit him, because originally he's written as this kind of crude, kind of asshole truck driver. And Jones, just like, they tailored it to fit his persona, where he's a much more urbane, intelligent guy. And it's just such a smart move.
It is a happy accident because it does hold true to the themes of people who are being marginalized in one way or another, trying to stay safe from white men.
Yeah. And yet it's never really verbally addressed in the film. There's an undercurrent to it, but Romero and his fellow filmmakers thought they were kind of being a little advanced by not making it an issue in the film. That he just happens to be a black guy who's in this situation.
So glad they made that decision, because if they had made the decision to make it a point in the movie, it would have been too obvious. I think the movie would have lost a lot of its staying power.
Jones himself actually wanted them to emphasize it a bit more, especially when it comes up to a couple scenes that are he thought were a little hairy given everything, but I like it that way. And I like how, unlike a lot of other movies like that Sidney Poitier would have been in around this time, where the black character is idealized, Ben's not like this ideal hero. He's a very average guy. He makes mistakes. He makes some choices that other people might be like, oh, that wasn't good. And it just makes him a lot more of a real person. Yeah, from this point on, Barbara's never quite going to be there.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. She is a girl, and now she has been bled on, so she's transitioning into a different phase of life, and right now it is traumatizing. Mm-hmm. A lot like Carrie and her first period, it was very traumatizing. So we see her spend about half or 3/4 of the rest of the film recovering her senses.
Yeah. And the zombies are smart enough to go after their vehicle. Although in this case, it might have been just the lights.
There are 2 of them out there. Have you seen any more around here? I can take care of those 2.
I love to imagine what Ben's backstory is. I mean, he shows up in this nice sweater. He's well dressed. I wonder what he was up to. Was he like a college guy? Who was he? I gotta say also, for a low budget, the makeup is for the zombies is pretty good. Most of it was done by Marilyn Eastman, who's going to show up later on as Helen Cooper.
Filming it in black and white is brilliant for that kind of thing. You don't have to be color accurate. You can just what works on the screen better. I think chocolate sauce is usually used for blood because it reads really, really well on a camera as blood.
Also, I love how we have this violent scene. It's all off camera. We're going to get tons of on-screen violence later, but it's pretty nicely done. So now he's taking care of the 2 that we saw. Oh, here's another one. So now the problem's compiling. This zombie is John Russo, the co-screenwriter. He actually does a really good zombie performance, too. This walk is great. Also like that you can just subtly see the mess that Ben has made of these guys' heads. And the great suspense here of Ben slowly lumbering in, and this other zombie is already close to attacking Barbara. This kind of fight scene we're about to see will be repeated in so many other zombie movies where it's like, oh, the weapon is just out of reach and you're grappling with a zombie. But here we get it first. And this, while, I mean, the main violence is off screen, this next shot is really still effective. Just that sound of the head hitting the ground and the mortician's wax for the wound. And I like that, much like Ken Foray will do in Dawn of the Dead, we see that Ben is really affected by this violence he has to do. He is not happy about this.
Well, what I like so far about this is that they have to be destroyed in the brain, which means they are changing. Their minds are literally changing. So having our characters change their minds can be read as a way to make other people evolve into better ideas.
Which gets into a lot of the political subtext that I'm sure we're going to get into in many ways with this movie. I love that shot of the zombie stumbling back, and we see 4 more, and we realize, oh, the problem is much bigger now. They're going to keep coming. And that eye move on Russo's part was intentional. They wanted to make it seem like he might get up again. They said they never got that scare right, I think because Jones actually says the line before he starts moving, because if he had moved first, it would look like he was getting up. Also, this might be a flub. You can see the actors kind of waiting for their cue to start moving, but I almost read it as the zombies are just kind of standing there until they see something like, oh, now we're moving.
Exactly. Like motion-activated zombies.
There you go. One of these zombies, this guy reminds me of Lon Chaney Jr. a little bit.
David Caruso.
Hey man, fuck you. As we're going to find out later, Ben has seen enough to know that fire scares them. So I don't know if he kind of intuited the whole getting them in the head thing or if that was just a happy accident on his part, but... Yeah, Jones is one of the few actors in this who would actually go on to a few other roles. He's great in Ganja and Hess, if you haven't seen that one. Fantastic vampire movie, and I guess he was in Beat Street too. And then he passed away of a heart attack at the age of 51. What a loss.
Get some more lights on in this house.
And amazing how the tenor of this house changes once the lights are on.
Well, it seems like a regular 60s sitcom now. Oh, looking for the wrench. Where is it? Fixing the house because I'm a dude.
There's almost the sense of they were about to just try and escape, and, you know, even though the truck was almost out of gas, now they have to barricade themselves in.
So now that he's here, and he's really showing that he has a handle on this, it's left Barbara to be able to have the rest of her breakdown.
And I like that we see that Ben isn't really great at handling this breakdown. He doesn't quite know what to do with her, like we see here. he kind of stops himself. He realizes, okay, she's traumatized.
I know you.
She's more than afraid, and I understand that he doesn't read the trauma there. We got to see Barbara go through all of this. For all he knows, this is how she is.
Yeah. But I think he also kind of reads that maybe if we keep her busy with stuff, find some wood, do this, do that, maybe it'll help her kind of cope with it. And you see he gets through a little bit there.
But only when he starts being patronizing, which she really is acting like a child here. She needs a parent to tell her what to do because she can't handle anything right now.
Yeah, it's like she's been reset.
Right, yeah. Her system has not fully booted up.
I also have to say that this is shot at pretty much TV ratio 1:3:3 in black and white. It has kind of an interesting transition point. It feels like a lot of this situation you can imagine as a 50s science fiction movie, except we would have been from the point of view of a scientist and the military would have come in and we would have gotten explanations for everything. So it's almost like tweaking those conventions, but it's also hitting that a lot of people would have been watching news on black and white TVs. So a lot of the things as it gets violent start to look like news footage. I love that shot.
It is, and it's just another showy bit that to show that Barbara's having trouble dealing with reality. Plus, I like that it is a music box, which is it's an object of fantasy. It is a child or somebody trying to recapture their youth object.
I love the visual of those doors and it closing on her eyes, kind of like that she's about to be barricaded in here with Ben. That locked into this house for the rest of this movie.
The antlers are kind of over her, and I know, but it does make her look like her head is on the wall there with antlers, but still there on the wall.
I see it, yeah. I wonder whose picture that is on the mantelpiece, if it was just some random thing that they found for prop dressing. And I love she finds like the least useful wood.
I found you kindling.
Here you go. Although the knife that she leaves on the refrigerator there is going to be very important later on. Yeah, I think Judith O'Dea is great as Barbara. She does such a good job. Because I could so easily imagine somebody overacting this. Or...
Yeah. It's very, very difficult to portray deep trauma without wailing and overdoing it. But her restraint in this is showing just how close to the edge she is.
That right there, like the way she reacts to loud noises for the rest of the movie, or flames, or just random things.
Yeah, these are definitely trauma reactions.
Yeah. So she's going to try and help out as best she can, which isn't much, but...
Well, over time, she's able to do more.
Yeah.
Which in itself is a really interesting cycle for her. The youth trauma, working through the youth. Working through their trauma. And the youth, depending.
I know the character gets a lot of flack for this, of like, being a sort of chauvinist point of view, but I think it feels very realistic. I mean, I think there are a lot of men or women who would have this reaction to this.
It's absolutely authentic.
And it's not the usual just hysterics that you'd expect in a sci-fi movie of the 50s or a horror movie from the 50s.
The typical would have her screaming and fainting.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is a much more nuanced portrayal of trauma.
I love this whole scene, that we're going to get this scene described that we never get to see, but just the way it's written, the way Jones performs this monologue about the violence he's seen is so good.
The violence he's seen, while, by the way, even though it's against inanimate objects, he is doing violence. And she's focusing on, and I'm going to say it, focusing on very feminine things. The music box, and now lace, things of domesticity. She wants to go back into her safety where she'd been several hours ago. Still naive, still a child. Blood has not happened. She's not trapped. Men are not after her. She's still a child.
Meanwhile, Jones has to perform this monologue while disassembling this table, which was kind of a one-take affair, so he had to get it right. You'll notice a lot of him actually pulling the legs off is off camera. Just in case, I think.
I guess the driver must have
I love the design of these table legs. They become kind of iconic when he's using them as a torch later.
It went right through the billboard, ripped over a gas pump, and never stopped moving. By now it's like a moving bonfire.
And this moment where he just has to stop and reacts to what he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to process his trauma as well, and his processing is quite different than Barbara's, and they're both like very valid, very real reactions. That's one of the things I think is so momentous of this movie. It's horror, there are monsters, but guess what? Every single person in this movie has an authentic reaction. I believe all of it.
And none of them are the stereotypical, square-jawed hero, damsel in distress. They all just feel like real people who got caught in this thing and probably wouldn't have ever encountered each other normally.
By now there were no more screams. I realized it.
He does a lot of great little nuances there, like the blinking, the wiping the sweat from his eyes, or...
Those things. Just standing there.
His performance, I mean, he acts with every bit of his body.
Yeah.
I started to drive. I just plowed right through.
I love just the horror and confusion with the way he says this, that he can't figure out why they wouldn't get out of the way of his car or his truck.
And he's looking out into the distance. He's
Yeah.
not looking at Barbara. This is just him trying to process.
I love how he kind of shakes this off as he shakes off the horror of this moment that he's remembering right here. It's a really subtle thing, but he just kind of like closes his eyes and shakes his head like, oh, no, I can't think of that with that. Beautiful.
We were riding in the cemetery.
Now, this was scripted, but Romero let O'Day pretty much improvise this, and how she delivers it is just beautiful.
Yeah, I'm glad.
And I guess they almost lost this take because of sound issues, but thankfully they were able to rescue the sound because it's an amazing take.
Jonathan. And he said,
And that is a wig that she's wearing for the top hair. Apparently she hated it. Every once in a while when she moves a lot, you can see it slide a little.
we didn't have any.
I can't imagine, her looking this without it, though.
And oh, it's hot in here. Hot.
Again, stress reactions.
Yep.
Some people get overheated, some people get cold.
And you can see Ben is like, he's uncomfortable with this. He can't really deal with having to hear this story. So he just kind of focuses on what he's doing.
And I said, Johnny, if you'd gotten up earlier, we wouldn't be late.
She's telling the story how a child tells a story.
Yeah.
And I said,
Focusing on details that are not important at all and changing some of them.
this man started walking up the road. He came slowly.
I remember us seeing this on the big screen one time and this scene actually getting a lot of laughs, which I was kind of annoyed by.
That happens every time we see a classic film.
That's true. Mostly just from Ben's sort of, not indifference, but just like, I can't really deal with this right now. I got stuff to do.
I went up to this man.
And he is kind of dismissive of what's going on with her.
Why don't you just keep calm?
And I looked up and I said, Goody. And he grabbed me. He grabbed me. And he ripped
I actually have a very hard time with this because she's so good at it.
I know, it's her, the way she does this speech is so good.
Johnny, help me.
I love this little stumble that she makes, which fits in character here, that she's almost says, Johnny, attack this man, and changes.
And then Johnny came and he ran and
It was like she was going to say, he attacked this man. No, he fought this man.
I got so afraid I ran.
It's a nice little stumble.
I ran. And Johnny didn't come.
And here we see that she is really not processed her brother's certain death. I do think Ben could handle this moment a little better than he does.
No, I agree. If he were a human,
Yeah.
it would actually be better for him to respond differently. But character-wise, this is a very interesting choice.
Yeah, this is one of the big scenes that Jones had a problem with, and I don't blame him, because what he's about to do in this scene would much more fit the original version of the Ben character, this rough trucker guy, than this character that we've met.
Don't you know what's going on out there? This is no Sunday school.
Their main thing was they had to get Barbara unconscious somehow.
Yeah, they had to stop her screaming. Sorry.
But I mean,
And
that's a punch.
It's definitely a punch. I wish it hadn't been a
Yeah.
punch because that's a bit too much. But since people were known to slap someone to shock them out of something like that, I would have understood it better. Maybe not a punch.
Jones was also conscious of he's a black man punching a white woman in this movie. That's not going to go over well necessarily.
Right.
So, and it's funny to think that this was probably filmed right around the same time that In the Heat of the Night came out, which has the same thing. Black guy gets slapped by somebody, slaps them right back.
But
and
you
it's
notice
this iconic moment.
he undoes the rest of her coat buttons, and you could think, oh, well, this is a threatening gesture. He's going to undress her. No. She had said she was hot.
Mm-hmm.
He finished unbuttoning her coat so she'd be comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. I love this section of the movie where this radio actually almost becomes another character while he's trying to do this. Where we get little dribbles of information about what's going on.
Which is a very War of the Worlds situation.
And honestly, in a different form, it's kind of what we've all gone through over the past 2 years, where nobody really knows what's going on, and we're getting little bits of, it could be this, it might be this, we might do this. Oh, what we're advising you, that's changed, now we think you should do this.
I am sadly now reframing the entire past
Sorry.
several years as a zombie attack.
But this feels like a very real way that you'd encounter this. And again, whereas in most horror movies or science fiction movies of the day, we'd be with the scientist or the military guy who's right in the center investigating this. No, we're with these people who only find out what's happening from what they hear on the radio and the TV, all these tiny little bits of information that don't really tell them much. Oh, I noticed there's a weird little thing here in the audio where it just suddenly jumps into misshapen monsters, which was supposed to be the ending of the line earlier when they're like, they're also described as, people in a trance. I guess they either had to build or open up this fireplace in this house for this scene, and it's pretty incredible. This music right here, I remember, actually shows up in Creepshow in the Lonesome Death of Jordie Verrill segment. They enhance it with a bit of extra music, but it's in the background of that. Also, I hate to point it out, but you can see there's daylight out the window.
Yeah.
Or at least
they
early
did day
evening.
for night.
Yeah.
Still good.
Considering how much of this movie is actually shot at night, it's pretty great. I mean, this is still a period when there would be a lot of day for night in movies, and it never looks right.
Factory workers are being urged to stay at their places of employment, not to make any attempt to get to their homes. However, in spite of this urging and warning, streets and highways...
Oh, really? So, see, this is something I would not have believed, and now that I know this is absolutely how people would behave, it makes the zombie the zombie apocalypse threat even more frightening. Actually, really frightening.
Tell people not to do something, they'll be like, oh, we're going to do that very thing.
My freedoms.
Honestly, nowadays, and we see a little bit of that in this movie, if you told somebody it's a zombie attack, they'd be like, no, it isn't. It's a lie. It's a conspiracy. They're lying about the zombie attack because they want to get us under their control. Man, the past few years have made me even more cynical.
It is difficult to talk about this movie without the political and the social commentary coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to agree with what we're saying, but just be aware that this film is inviting that sort of commentary.
I got to mention that cut there where it's behind closed doors, cut to everything being boarded up. That's a beautiful marriage of sound and image. And in terms of kind of the political subtext, one of the beautiful things like this that goes with Texas Chainsaw Massacre is that it's not really overt. You can read this movie so many different ways. You could look at this as these zombies who are dead, who, the dead are sort of like older generations, as this older generation that is trying to squash the younger generation. As you mentioned, the minorities, women, black people, people of color, just sort of, attacking them and feasting on them and cannibalizing them. You could look at the zombies as sort of a newer generation. They're kind of a new species in a way, and that's the way Romero sort of looked at them in the later movies of the series. That this is a movie about sort of a revolution in a way.
Schools and government buildings demanding shelter and protection from the wholesale murder, which apparently is engulfing much of the nation.
Poor Ben must be exhausted.
Now, this whole time, There's been pounding, there's been screaming, there's been people walking around, and no one listens to the commentary without having seen the film first. So, little spoiler, there are people in the basement. They haven't bothered to investigate the sound. They are literally living with their head in the ground. Like, they're zombies of a different sort. They're under the earth like a body, but they're alive and they're refusing to come out.
It's like Ben and Barbara hold up, they're hold up even more on a different level. I love going back and watching this again and just listening to the radio commentary because it's really well written. It feels like actual radio copy. And I like that his first thought is, here, let me get her some shoes so she'll be comfortable.
He is doing what he can to help take care of her within what he understands what she's going through.
I never noticed that before, that shot of the gun right over it is an American flag.
Yeah.
How beautiful.
It's definitely a commentary on how, of course there's a gun here. It's the United States.
The gun here is almost going to be like the conch shell from Lord of the Flies. It is sort of the symbol of power and authority from here on in. And interesting to note, Dwayne Jones hated guns. He really did not. He was very uncomfortable using it. Like, they had to have a crew member kind of take him test shooting just so he could get comfortable with it. But he was very, very cautious. He had to have it checked by somebody before and then handed to him. He'd shoot the take and then hand it right back.
That's smart.
Man, just the little subtle expressions he does there. Like, well, I'm trying.
This place is boarded up pretty solid now. We ought to be all right here for a while. We have a gun and bullets.
And it's clear now that their basic needs are met that he realizes it's going to be a little bit, I'd better get her back to a state where we can have a conversation and wait this all out.
Yeah.
It's very going to the Winchester and letting it all blow over.
Hey, that's us. We're doing all right.
You know, despite the fact that we're going to find out later on that his plan is mistaken and wrong and kind of inadvertently causes everybody's deaths, I love him as a film hero. I totally would follow this guy. Because even if he's wrong, his logic feels correct.
Everything is all right for now. I'll be back to reinforce
Well,
the windows.
I know we'll get into it toward the end, but the human element, it's unpredictable. And I think his plan was solid, but humans get in the way.
And he keeps kind of emphasizing if they work together, they can get through this. And if they had...
Which is true. If they had worked together, their chances would have been much better. And that kind of goes to every situation. Working together toward a common good actually works.
I didn't mention that the mutilated corpse here, which was a huge shock to me as a kid seeing it, was actually like one of those visible skull model kits that Romero just put a ping pong ball eye on and some Play-Doh. And you can see here the actual face of the person playing this. Right there. And that's actually Kyra Schoen, who's going to show up in a little bit as Karen, the bitten daughter of the Coopers. They needed a body, and she's like, all right. She actually doubles for one of the disembodied hands that the zombies are eating later on, too.
Consistent reports from witnesses to the effect that people who acted as though they were in a kind of trance were killing and eating their victims.
And here the movie kind of ramps things up even to a higher level. There's cannibalism. Yay!
Well, the best thing here is that while they are saying this, we don't actually know this is what's happening yet.
But
We haven't seen this.
But we can tell from this push-in on Barbara, she's thinking about Johnny and imagining what has happened to him out there in that cemetery.
That he's dead, that he
Yeah.
has been eaten.
Examination of victims' bodies shows
I love that series of zooms. Kind of, they're not completely aligned, but I still really love them.
and so this incredible story becomes more
Isn't that like accelerating action? It's the editing where you get closer and closer on two separate things that are related.
Yeah,
reports which have been
the speed isn't quite right, but I know Romero tried.
situation. It is happening, and it would appear that no one is safe from this wave of mass murder.
And that's a nice little misdirect there. Like, oh my God, they're in the house. Nope. There are points where the house in this movie reminds me of my grandmother's old house.
I'm sorry, a radio. He's been hiding in this house for how long and hasn't realized there's a radio? Did he just get into the house and flee to the basement?
I think so.
That's the
Considering when we find out later on that their car was turned over, they were basically chased into the house, I could imagine he was so frantic he was just like, nope, basement, basement, go.
Sure, you must know what a girl's screaming sounds like. Those things don't make any noise. Anybody would know somebody ever needed help.
Look, it's kind of hard to hear what's going on from down there.
Keith Wayne, who plays Tom, pointed out in one of the commentaries for this that he blinks a lot during his dialogue, and now I can't not see it.
If there were more,
The racket sounded like the place was being ripped apart. How were we supposed to know?
Now, Carl Hardman here, who did a lot of the sound work and makeup work and a bunch of other different things for it, he kind of looked down at his performance as a little too over the top. I think it's great, honestly, and I think it's a nice contrast to Jones. And this kind of macho male figure who just, doesn't really help anybody out. He's just full of, a lot of complaints and whining. Just feels very real to me right now.
Mister, we came up. Okay, we're here. Now I suggest we all go back downstairs.
This is also the point where the movie to me kind of becomes about politics. You have a bunch of characters who all kind of want the same thing. They want to survive this, but they just look at it from different points of view of how to accomplish it.
The cellar's the safest place.
Which is very American. I mean, I'm sure it's very human, but we're dealing specifically with Americans.
Yeah. And this is something that the 1990 remake that Tom Savini did from Romero's kind of updating of his own script took further by even suggesting that both of them get so involved in this battle, they start making bad decisions that kind of hurt themselves.
could strengthen everything up, Mr. Cooper.
With all of us working, we can fix this place up in no time. We have everything we need up here.
We can take all that stuff downstairs with us.
It's the upstairs-downstairs debate.
There's a million windows up here. All these windows, you're gonna make them strong enough to keep these things out, huh?
I also can't help but think that all the noise they're making when they yell at each other is probably attracting more zombies.
Yeah, the hammering, the yelling.
And here's the thing. What Harry says here is absolutely right.
My point. Only there's not going to be 5 or even 10. There's going to be 20, 30, maybe 100.
He's not wrong. There's going to be tons of them, and there's going to be enough to get through their barricades.
And it's very, very likely that Ben has begun to really attract a bunch of them out there. There was 3, and now there can be so many more from the hammering and the yelling and all of the ins and outs, the radio.
That moment where he's like, they know we're in here now, he kind of accepts that.
But down in the cellar, there's no place to run to. I mean, if they did get
And see, that's the thing. This is very logical on Tom's part. This is the reason why the cellar would be a scary place to go.
to see what's going on outside. But down there with no windows, if a rescue party
Something nobody brings up in this movie is why not the attic? That's something they do in the remake, too. Oh, boom shadow.
I don't know, Mr. Cooper. I think he's right. You know how many's out there?
I don't know. Maybe 6 or 7.
Look, you two can do whatever you like.
I like how Barbara is like barely conscious. It just looks up at Harry. He's like, why is he talking so loud? It looks like she just wants him to shut up.
Again, no matter what happens.
It's a really subtle thing there. Just her like wincing at him yelling.
You make yours.
And being so limp.
Yeah.
About this. We can make it to the cellar if we have to.
And I like how Ben looks over at Tom like, okay, this guy's sensible. I can deal with this guy. Good.
At least consider this a while.
You box yourself in the cellar and those things get in the house, you've had it. At least
Yeah, I would totally be Team Ben.
Yeah, it looks like about 8 or 10 out there now.
It's more than that were.
There's still so few out there, they could probably handle it.
Yeah,
I've always wondered why they didn't at least try.
I agree. Keith Wayne also has a Burt Ward quality. Reminds me of Robin from Batman. There's where that knife comes in handy. He grabs Barbara's knife and goes at it. That clay hand, it's not perfect, but it's not bad.
Oh, he doesn't stab. This isn't a slasher type film, but he does slash. No stabbing though.
He's like hacking.
Yeah. He doesn't quite know. He's not comfortable using a knife. Let's put it that way.
I love this subtle moment where this is the first time they've really get a sense there's something else with these people. He shoots them, and you can see Ben and Tom exchanges look like, what the hell? How is this guy not on the ground? Also, although squibs had been used in movies before since like the 40s, the use of squibs here is pretty great.
Again, helped with it being black and white.
Yeah. But I mean, it's full-on little explosives with blood packs. That stuff is risky. And then this, the way the light suddenly moves enough so you can see the headshot. Beautiful. And now they're really coming.
This is quite a famous image.
So is that one.
Yes.
I love that. I think it's actually the actress's name on her morgue tag, Carol
On her
Smythe.
tag.
Yeah. Marilyn Eastman talks about how they had to use body makeup because she shined too much in the light. And speaking of, there's Marilyn Eastman, who we're going to meet as Harry Cooper in a second role as the bug-eating zombie. She did a great makeup on herself.
You gotta fix these boards. You're crazy. Those things are gonna be at every window and door in this place. We've got to get down into the cellar.
I never noticed in the background, you can see Tom kind of like recoiling from what he just saw through the window.
I'm taking the girl with me. Leave her here. Keep your hands off her. And everything else is up here.
I will say, and Romero would point this out, that screen direction-wise, he hadn't quite figured that out yet. So you can see that characters are looking in the wrong direction sometimes, and the 180-degree rule is kind of out the window, and yet it never bothers me with this movie.
It doesn't, because there is so much chaos, and it makes sense for them to be looking at anything. Just be very, very scattered.
I know this has been presented as a play. I would love to see this performed. It must be pretty incredible.
The movie plays like a chamber piece, and you know how much I love chamber pieces.
Oh, yeah.
It's always a time to explore human interaction. They're usually dialogue heavy, and they usually have a lot of significance behind what they're saying, which, of course, we have here.
Yep. Also, I got to say, as talking about what to do, I don't think there's any young horror fan who's watched this and not kind of come up with their zombie attack plan watching this, what they would do, where they would go, how they would handle it.
The idea is so alluring that even now I'm trying to think of, well, why didn't they do this?
Yeah. What kind of weapons would you carry? Where would is there some place you would choose to hole up? We've seen how shopping malls go, so maybe not that one. And here comes Judith Ridley, who is a secretary at the Leighton Image, the Romero's film company that he was running while they made this movie. That's something I got to bring up. A lot of reviews talk about this as being made by talented amateurs, and they were really not. They were professional filmmakers who did a lot of really amazing commercial films. You can still find a lot of their commercials online, and the energy that they put into those, the ability to kind of get an idea across with a quick visual, is really stunning.
Well, how better to mythologize a film than to portray it as a happy accident or these young people, which is the cult of the young. I mean, has been forever. The young people doing something so brilliant, the inexperienced luck right out of the bat, or luck right out of the hat.
But I mean, like, they knew what they were doing. They had all the equipment. It was a lot like Carnival of Souls, where, you know, Herc Harvey and his group had done a lot of industrial films. They knew how to make movies, and so did Romero and the Leighton Image crew. And now we're finally introduced to Marilyn Eastman as Helen and Kyra Schoen as Karen, who has one line in the whole movie coming up later.
Now, I could be wrong, but it looks like... Who's him?
Carl Harbin?
Thank you. It looks like Carl is the only person with a head wound who's alive.
Yeah. Which, I mean, considering that we find out their car got turned over, maybe it was when the car was being flipped. I also just realized that that's probably his trench coat that's on Karen. We never actually see him in it. This scene is not actually in the basement of the house. The house didn't have a real basement. It was just a dirt floor. So this basement is actually from the Leighton Image production facilities that for Romero's company, which is why all of the power equipment here and like power boxes seem a little big for just a normal house.
We'll see. When they come begging me to let them in down here.
That's important, isn't it?
What?
To be right, everybody else to be wrong.
What do you mean by that?
I guess a lot of this dialogue was also improvised by Eastman and Harbin too. They kind of had a script. They knew where it was supposed to be going, but they kind of put their own little touches on a lot of the dialogue here.
Here is some kind of mass murder. It's going on everywhere. The radio said to stay inside.
Radio?
I also love how very quickly we get a sense of the marriage between these two, of how sick they are of each other, how combative they are, and how much he's done with Harry's attitudes and his idea that he knows exactly what to do and what's going on.
Supposed to look for a safe place to hide.
Take the boards off that door.
We are staying down here, Helen.
Harry, that radio is at least some kind of communication. If the authorities know what's happening with those...
Also, I love Harry's chain smoking. He goes through a lot of cigarettes in this scene just out of anger.
How are we going to know what's going on if we lock
like right here. See, that's another cigarette gone.
We may not enjoy living together, but dying together.
If you hear music outside, that's just a very loud, annoying car. We apologize. Oh, coming up, there's a really bizarre jump cut here you'll notice. They apparently took quite a bit of dialogue out of the movie at some point, and they basically had to align this cut very roughly on an editing machine right there. Supposedly, they lost this amazing wide shot filmed outside where you would have seen just how many zombies are surrounding the house. Just tons and tons of them, including a lot of mannequins. It was like their biggest shot in the movie. It got cut, and then eventually the original elements were destroyed in a flood in the basement of the Latent Image building, so they were never able to recover those.
Okay, open up.
It's also worth noting that this cellar doorway that we see in the house all the time was actually just built on the location using a section of what was the kitchen. But it really does look like that's the cellar entranceway in those scenes.
I'll take good care of her, Helen. She's all I have.
Somebody think of the children.
Why don't you go upstairs now?
Look at his hand wringing. Literally hand wringing. Oh, and this. I love this detail of her like tracing these patterns on the doily on the couch. I've done that sometimes when I've been like really terrified, where your brain just kind of reverts into like, oh, here's a pattern I can follow.
It's a grounding technique.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting about it is that she is actively trying to find a way out of this basically catatonia.
And we have Helen, who has no idea how to react to her very well. And you can see she keeps like she's going to talk to her or say something to her and doesn't really know what to do. And then another nice slow zoom on Barbara. And then we have this reaction to the lighter, which I find kind of fascinating. Much like the zombie, she seems to be kind of terrified of fire for a moment, or at least an action like that.
I honestly thought of it differently, that the strike of the match, finally, it clicked with her. There's someone else in the room. She looks over, and I think she's seeing her for the first time. She's understanding, oh, there's someone in here with me for the first time, so she gets a little frightened by that.
See, yeah, that was interesting that Helen looks to the match like, oh, I think this bothered her, strikes it out, and then Barbara goes back to looking at the thing. There was something, I got a sense there was something about the fire that disturbed her somehow. The energy that Hardman has in this role of just like moving around, he's constantly like, just, he can't like stand still for a second. It's wonderful. Oh, you can see the shadow of a light stand in the corner, I just noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Actually pretty good considering that. A couple boom mic shadows here and there and lights, but...
Well, ones that you really have to look for.
Yeah.
Those chairs together. There's a socket over here.
I love this right here. Harry is just the complete asshole.
I don't understand what's going on. I don't want anyone's life on my hands.
Of course you don't.
I don't want to hear any more from you, mister. If you stay up here, you take orders from me. And that includes leaving the girl alone.
This is kind of where an uneasy... Now it's become different nations, basically. These are two nations who are barely living in peace, right up against each other, and asserting their rule over each other.
Meanwhile, Helen is just like trying to be as helpful as she can.
Now, there's also this idea of leaders of countries having all of the... being the people who put other people in danger if their choices are wrong. Start wars that don't affect them physically, but endanger other people. And we have the same situation here. There are the two leaders of their respective countries upstairs and downstairs. And then we have the rest of the cast who are very underneath the rule of those two characters.
Yeah, and kind of get pressed into service one way or
Right.
the other for their various plans.
Right.
This reporter here, Chuck Craig, who was a newsman and wrote his own copy apparently, if you keep an eye out, he's going to pop up as a zombie later on too. I feel like everybody popped up as a zombie as well.
Investigation of reports from funeral homes, morgues,
And here we have the big reveal that they are actually
unburied
the unburied dead. There it is, the unburied dead, this idea of if you're in a grave, does any of what's happening affect you or not? Or would the process of embalming kind of get rid of your organs so you wouldn't really be reanimated? It's an interesting question.
was advising people to stay inside, behind locked doors for safety. Well, that situation has now changed. Where
Again, I love that we don't have anybody come in to explain the situation. All we get are these news broadcasts, either radio or TV.
provide rescue stations with food,
Which, again, I felt was inauthentic before before 17 or so, 16, I really had a lot more faith in humans, and I thought something like this would be a little, not really true. People would have more information and they'd step up, and unfortunately, Romero had the better luck on how humans would respond in a crisis.
Man, you look at this and you look at like Dawn and especially the crazies, and it's like, man, he had his finger on the pulse of how this kind of thing would actually play out. Now, then there's this question. How do you feel about this whole Venus probe explanation for the dead coming back to life? I'm glad they chuck it for the rest of the movies in this series, but
Honestly, I feel great about it because I agree. I don't think it's a great explanation for what it was, but it is the kind of thing that would happen. Like, here are all these wild theories of how it could have happened. And there is even the question here. They're putting it up. Could it be? And because the news is saying that, a lot of people are going to take that as, yes, this is how it is. The news said it. But no, the news didn't say it. The news said it could be.
oh, that's Romero on the left with the microphone.
yes, that was the subject.
Now, for a little bit of production value, they decided to actually get the whole group here, take them down to Washington, and film this with no permits. They just kind of showed up and did it as quickly as they could before anybody tried to stop them.
I'm not sure that that's certain. No, I don't.
And again, like we've been seeing now with disasters, this idea of nobody can get on the same page about what causes it or what to do. Nobody really wants to go on record as to what they think is happening.
At this time, gentlemen. I must disagree with these gentlemen presently until this is irrefutably proved.
And I love this question of why this military guy is so kind of gun shy about committing to this idea.
Professor, you feel
Here we're seeing on a larger scale the actual people who are in charge of the things that happen in the United States. So it's something that Bill and Harry have to answer to. So whatever the politicians do is going to affect everyone else.
Yeah.
And it filters down through, governors and then mayors and people, heads of households. The younger children are pretty much coming in last.
Now, normally these guys would be the heroes of this movie, or the main characters at least, but nope. They're just little people interviewed on TV. Apparently, a couple security guards at the Capitol came up and stopped them and told them, please, if we let one general park here, we have to let them all. They actually thought he was a real general, and they were actual military personnel.
Amazing.
They thought they were going to get arrested.
I saw a sign that said Willard.
It's only about 17 miles from here.
You know this area. You from around here?
Judy and I are both from around here. We were on our
Again, we get so little backstory of any of these characters, just little bits here.
First reports about this. So we knew the old house was here, and we came
What
in.
Tom and Judy were up to when this started, how they met Harry and Helen.
We went
Other
down to the
people.
basement, put a bar across the door, and it's pretty strong.
How could we possibly get away from here? We've got a sick child, 2 women, 1 woman.
2 women.
2 women, 1 out of her head.
Place is surrounded with these things.
Dr. Grimes, your entire staff.
When he first says that, you think 2 women is like, oh my God, we're weighed down with 2 women, but he says 3 men too. So
Yes, we have some answers. But first,
I like this guy. He has kind of a Leo G. Carroll quality to him.
for anyone who's been injured in any way. We don't know
Something I also have to bring up in comparison to a lot of movies of this period, most horror movies or science fiction movies are sort of like the normal world is disrupted by an event and the whole movie is about, doing something to resolve it and everything goes back to normal. And I kind of love that this movie doesn't allow you that. You get the sense that even if, the posse at the end gets things under control, even if the government gets everything under control, there is no going back to normal after this.
Yeah,
everything
it's a state
is
of exception.
Yeah, everything is completely changed from here on in.
Yeah, it's the moment where you've crossed from what was to what is now.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you deal with that change within yourself?
And I love that Romero pushes that in the sequels to, it's never going to get fixed. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And I think that really is kind of a sea change for these type of horror films where that's now allowed. You can actually push that further into, the world is not coming back. Oh, there's Kyra Schoen's single line. Which it does have a lot to say of this one child being said, basically expressing pain.
Cremation. Well, how long after death, then, does the body become reactivated?
It's only a matter of minutes.
See, now this guy is very cold and clinical about it, just like, it's a body, just burn it. But and this is something Romero plays with in the sequels too, that there are people who'd be like, no, it's sacred, I can't just burn it. No, it must have funeral rites, it must have this and that.
The bereaved will have to forego.
It would never be as simple as people just following the rules of, here's what you have to do, you have to destroy the brain, you have to burn them, that's it. It wouldn't work.
I need you to find some bedspreads or sheets to tear up into small strips, okay? Is there a fruit cellar here?
Yes.
We need some bottles or jars.
Now here's Ben coming up with their big escape plan.
Hey, there's a big can of kerosene down there.
I'll see what I can find.
It's funny, I assume those are microphone or light stand shadows, but they actually work really well. It kind of divides the room in a cool spiderweb way.
We can toss the cocktails from a window upstairs. Meantime, a couple of us can go out and try to get the gas and come back for the rest of the people.
But that'll leave a door open someplace.
I like at this point he can't really question Ben's leadership because at least he's proposing something.
Before we go, we'll put some supplies behind the cellar door. While we're gone, the rest of you can hold up in there.
I found some fruit jars in the cellar. And there's
That was
a key out
fast.
here
Yeah.
that's labeled for the gas pump out back.
Not really that.
Wow, that's not a very quick amount of hunting. He finds the gas keys and the jars. Pretty good.
You're it then. You and I'll go.
I like that little moment there, that extra stare of like, are you cool? Are you down for this?
Find behind the cellar door. You can go upstairs and toss the cocktails from a window. Tom, you and I will have to unboard this.
I love that every shot of Ben here is very stable, but when he shows the reaction shots of Harry and Tom, it's a handheld camera, and it's a little shakier. Like, Ben is the stabilizing force, but these two guys are scared shitless.
Well, he's also certain. That nothing can change his mind that this plan will work, and the other two are uncertain of it. So it makes sense that the camera would not have any stability.
Before this emergency is over, we will need many, many more such rescue stations.
Now, this next scene is, I remember, was cut out of a lot of TV versions of it, because it is one of the few places where the movie kind of stops for a little bit. But I actually think it's kind of a nice scene.
How can you smile like that all the time?
Especially because Judith Ridley playing Judy doesn't really get a heck of a lot to do otherwise.
Come on, honey, we gotta move.
Tom, are you sure about the phone?
But as a character building thing, it's also kind of a nice fake out that you get this moment of romance between these two, this sweet moment. So you assume, okay, these characters are probably going to survive and they're going to be okay. And they're going to be toast in the next scene.
We'll call them. They might even be there.
I know. Tom,
Ridley wouldn't go on to act much after this. She was in
are you sure?
There's Always Vanilla Romero's next film, which, well, he was trying something different.
He tried.
Yeah, and then she'd go on to like doing dressing food for commercials and things.
I don't know.
Come on, honey, you're starting to sound like Mr. Cooper now.
Why do you have to go out there?
Look, I know how to handle that truck, and I can handle the pump. Ben doesn't know anything about that stuff.
That's a little presumptuous of you. Ben might know something about it.
Come on, honey.
He just said he wasn't too certain of it.
But there's going to be more and more of those things.
I know all that.
I like that her character kind of voices the indecision of like, yes, I know it's dangerous. I don't know what to do, though. I don't really know what the right move is.
Was for us to convince you that it was right to leave. Remember we had to go to Willard.
Everybody else kind of seems certain one way or the other.
Same thing, honey. It's not like just a wind passing through. We've got to do something, and fast.
This is really painful. I actually have not seen this since well before 2020, so this is my first reviewing of it, and all of this is hitting very hard.
See, that's one of the things that's amazing about this. You can look at it from, with the casting of Dwayne Jones, the civil rights angle. You can look at it from, I mean, Vietnam was starting to gear up at this point, and a lot of people read that into it, this idea of the chaos of Vietnam or the civil rights movement in general or just the social chaos. And now it has a whole different context. And I think if you watch this after 9/11, it would have a very different context there, too. It's such a beautifully adaptable idea.
We better get her downstairs.
One of the beautiful things about Romero's zombies is they can sub in for so many different things.
She's right. You have to go downstairs now, just for a little while until we get back.
All of the parental figures trying to get her into what they consider a safety.
Yeah. And that was the key word. Oh, leaving. Yes, thank you. Oh, I have to bring it up here. As they start tearing the boards off here, if you look carefully, you can actually see labels on some of them, so they could put them back on for continuity's sake.
Nice.
I think it's this one up in the corner here. Right there, upper right corner.
Yeah.
It's so quick, though, if you don't know it's there, that... I do have to bring up, for the 30th anniversary, John Russo went back and reshot new footage for this movie and integrated it in, cut some stuff out, and changed the soundtrack. And if you've ever seen that version, it's fucking awful. Man, I would not be a zombie, want to be a zombie just running around in my boxer shorts. That's just a bummer.
Chances are you wouldn't know.
Yeah, all right, that's true, but still. There is no dignity in being a zombie. That was pretty close, too. There's some hairy stuff in this in terms of stunts. Coming up, a zombie gets lit on fire, and it's John Russo yet again, and he literally just lit himself on fire and then was on camera for a few seconds and rolled and put himself out.
Wow. Was he wearing anything flame retardant?
Not too much, as far as I know.
All right. He's both brave and crazy.
Yeah. There was another point where they were trying to relight the smoking remains of the chair, and it set Russell Striner's brother Gary on fire, and Bill Heinzman, who plays the cemetery zombie, had to tackle him and put him out. This guy, that's the guy who would have played Ben right there, the one who just got his shirt torn off, Rudy Ricci. I don't know why she decides she has to do this, but... oh. It's like, now Tom's not going to be focused on what he needs to do. She's just endangered everybody.
This is one of the problems I do have with the movie, because it plays as the clingy girlfriend, where they could have played it slightly differently. They could have given her an actual reason to go out there and have have that reason be why it falls apart, and not just her being there because she wants to.
Yeah, the remake actually did that with, she's the one who knows how to drive a truck. Tom was going to pump the gas, and Ben was going to, cover them.
Right, and that makes more sense for her to be there.
Yeah.
But for her to leave the house and come out, I wish there had been a reason for that.
I agree. It was like, just she couldn't be separated from the macho manliness of Tom.
And it is irrational, and maybe that's the whole point, is that people make irrational decisions.
See, that's the thing. A lot of bad decision-making in horror movies that would make me cringe before, again, after the past few years, I'm like, nope, I believe someone would do that. One of the few day for night shots at this point in the movie, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to see that at all.
It's not a bad look.
No, it worked.
Bad.
It worked okay. This right here, I love this kind of dusk shot.
Now, is that a repeated shot from earlier?
Yeah. It's going to come up again in a second, too. Mm-hmm. Oh, I never realized you could see the moon in the background there. That was cool. Now, if only Tom had been a little more careful with the damn gas pump.
Or...
oh.
yeah.
Probably shouldn't have put the torch there either. Yeah, that's true.
My guess would be don't pump gas unless it's in the place for it.
I think so. I think I don't know if it's that he the shot that Ben fired made it leak, or if he had pulled the trigger a little too soon on the gas pump. I don't know. Either way, bad move. And now this is kind of heroic on Tom's part. He's saying he's got to get away from the pump so it doesn't blow everything up. But still a terrible move. I love that fly crawling across the screen there. Man, if I were Tom in this instance, I would die so frustrated that this is why I get killed. My jacket's caught.
Take your jacket off. So we've just learned in this movie, cars are dangerous. They're taking away all of your cars. No, because there have been car accidents that got at least 2 of them there. Well, 2 groups there. And that one just blew up. But cars are not going to save you from this. You have to get away somehow from these things that are not going to stop.
Yep.
And a car will not help.
Well, we saw in the remake also, Barbara just walks by them, which is something that, people would complain. They're going so slowly. Why don't you just walk by them? So she finally does in that film, and that works. That must have been a little hairy, too, waving this lit torch really close to these zombie extras. And you can see just how many there are at this point. I love this shot here of Dwayne Jones kind of lighting himself with the torch as he runs around. That son of a bitch.
Mm-hmm. The plan's falling apart again because of human error.
Yep. Oh, and cowardice in this case.
Well, that would be the error.
Yeah. The error was before. This is cowardice. I love that look of, I'm going to beat the shit out of you in a second. It's this moment of, I have to help him out now, so... This is the closest I think they come to actually working together at all in the movie.
Too late, though.
Too late. And now that he has time to deal with it, boom. I'll admit the sound effects for the punches aren't great. Although the miming of it's pretty good. I think he misses a little bit with this one.
It's also a messy fight in the way that an actual fight would be messy. It's slow. There's a lot of exertion.
I love that Harry doesn't fight back. He's he's such a slug that he doesn't actually even fight back in this moment. He just kind of takes it. Maybe because he knew he had it coming too. I remember when this played at the movie theater when I was working there, I would sneak in every once in a while during this scene, and holy crap, it still worked. There was this guy who brought his girlfriend, and he was doing okay, I'll tell you when you can look. You can look now. And he made her look just as they're starting to eat, and you could hear her just be like, no! Or one couple that just jumped out of their skins during this, when somebody else moved a little too loud. And it made me so happy to see that the magic was still there. Oh, that's the newscaster from the TV there, eating the intestines. Oh, man, I can't believe they could actually get people to just eat some raw meat on camera for this.
Ugh.
Ew. That's Kyra Schoen again, the little girl.
They probably would not have been able to make that special effect work, but you're right, that was a lot of raw meat.
And again, nobody had really seen anything like this in a big movie, or at least not to this level. This really pushed the boundaries a bit. And this was before the MPA really had a rating system, so they would start playing this in situations where little kids could go see it because little kids like going to horror movies and stuff. And a lot of them were just not prepared for this. Roger Ebert has a review where he saw one of those screenings, and he was horrified at the reaction of some of the kids watching it. And now Barbara's kind of come back a bit. She's not quite there, but at least she's talking again.
Well, she's vocal, at least.
It's something. Oh, I think we missed it. There was a second where you could actually see the script propped up against the door
I did
a second
see it.
ago. Yeah.
I mean, is Willard the nearest town?
I love this little acting choice by Marilyn Eastman to just kind of creep into the doorway and look down like she's almost like she's subconsciously checking on Karen. That's a really beautiful touch.
You say those things turned your car over. You think we can get it back on its wheels and drive it? Where is it?
And despite their setbacks, Ben is immediately trying to think, okay, what next? What's the next car? What's our next way out of here?
Forget it.
I'd suggest having a car not be part of the plan at this point.
Well, if you have somebody who can drive and not douse it in gasoline, you might be okay.
What's wrong with her? How'd she get hurt?
One of those things grabbed her.
Bit her on the arm.
Funny to think that at this point in zombie lore, we're just about to learn about the whole zombie bite causing somebody to turn into a zombie. It's so accepted now, and yet it was completely new. Isn't it weird to think how this movie completely changed how we viewed zombies? Before this, it was all voodoo and Haiti and, some kind of evil wizard basically turning people into zombies. And this creates a whole new archetype for them. It sets up rules, it follows them, and now it's just become kind of the universal zombie rules.
Yeah, I know.
I love her delivery of that.
Good Lord.
I don't know if this music is library music or if they made it for the movie, but it's really effective.
Being monitored closely by scientists at all the radiation detection stations. At this hour, they report
See,
levels
this would seem to imply the radiation is the cause.
increased
And I guess there was more of that in the original movie they cut out. I don't like it. I much prefer that it's mysterious.
I like that it's mysterious, but I can also say I like that it's the fault of humans.
whatever cause.
They're both really great. I like the unknown because you get to really dig in there and have it be, oh, well, it's a virus, or, oh, it's aliens.
It's supernatural.
It's supernatural, right. Knowing it's specifically the radiation, that's human caused.
That is true.
All law enforcement agencies and the
These days, somebody would blame China.
and destroy the marauding ghouls.
I love how casual some of these guys are with their guns. It looks like they're just out for a day of fun hunting.
Well, they kind of are.
Yeah. I love that the true horror of this movie is that these are the people who are supposed to save you. Great.
By the radiation. The plan is kill the brain and you kill the ghoul.
Okay, so these are all white men. We've seen some of them with crucifixes. We've seen some of them, well, all of them with guns. So there's definitely this is the type of person you should be afraid of. And it's not afraid because they're monsters, but more because these are the people who have the power to decide whether or not you live or die.
I love the touch that the sheriff has a bunch of cigars in his hat band, like, he's ready for a celebration. Now, the reporter here is Bill Cardill, who used to run the kind of shock theater thing as Chilly Billy Cardill. And his daughter, Lori Cardill, would be the lead in Day of the Dead.
Club or a torch, beat 'em or burn 'em. They go up pretty easy. Well, Chief McClellan, how long do you think?
Again, most of this dialogue is just sort of improvised, and in the process, George Cassano, who plays the sheriff, came up with what is pretty much the signature line of this movie right here.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up. Well,
The way he tosses that off is so good.
well, we don't really know. We know we'll be into it most of the night. Probably.
I like how, the zombies are such a threat, and yet this guy's treating it so casually, like, it's not a huge deal. You can imagine once we get to Dawn of the Dead, that's the reason why this goes completely out of control, because these guys aren't taking it very seriously.
Official spokesman declined to speculate just how long it may take to kill off all the flesh eaters. So long as the heavy rain.
Photographically, this section is one of my favorites in the movie. This lighting, this noirish lighting, is so good.
Isn't the fuse? Power lines are down.
gun.
This says a lot that he doesn't really need the gun. If he was going to hide in the cellar, he wouldn't need the gun for anything, but...
He wants to take Ben's power, but also use that power to protect himself.
I love that you can see a piece of that skin on that hand is like torn up. And in that last moment when Harry is ranting, I love that you can see Barbara sort of look up and she's kind of in her head thinking about like, what is he saying? Like she's, again, starting to come back to herself. This series of cuts I just think is beautiful.
I think it's important to notice that the zombie does have the torch Ben was using.
Mm-hmm.
So the zombie's using a tool that's already been used as a tool and perhaps had witnessed it being used as a tool. So yes, let's pick this up and use it.
That's a loaded image for me. Somebody throwing a brick through the window. A brick through the window of a house where there's a black man holding up. And just these disembodied hands grabbing at him. Oh, it's so creepy.
Well, it's an image we've seen over and over since then, usually as an homage to this movie, but it's become a part of a zombie movie to have a scene like this.
I remember first seeing Thriller where they have that ending where they're in the house and the zombies are coming in, and then hearing that it was taken from this movie, and I assumed that it was only a tiny section of this movie, not realizing the whole movie would be these people in the house.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of scary to think what would happen here if they actually went down the cellar. Would Harry have just left him there? Would he shoot him?
I'm assuming that depending on how long they stayed there, the resources would become slim and then tensions would rise again.
Dwayne Jones actually hit Romero with the board when he flung that at him, too. He hit the Romero in the camera. And here you have our hero gun down an unarmed man. I mean, he kind of has to at this point because he can't turn his back on him. But it's still kind of a heavy moment.
Oh, he's not our hero. He's our protagonist.
I consider him a hero. He's flawed, but to me, he's still heroic enough. But still, and for it to be a black man shooting an unarmed white man, that's pretty heavy. I guess there was a lot of trouble with Hardman accidentally pulling down the coat rack with him on a lot of takes. It kind of got hilarious. I love that he's going to go die in his domain. Something about that shot where he runs his hand over his eyes. I almost feel like there's this moment of regret, like, oh my god, I've screwed it all up.
He does have the head wound.
Yeah. And that last moment where he's reaching out to his daughter. Oh, and here we go. Barbara finally kind of comes back.
Well, she sees no one's coming to the rescue,
Yep.
and no, she has to do something, or they're goners.
And she, in that moment, saves Helen.
Mm-hmm.
Briefly, but she does save her. That reveal, that must have been such an amazing shock to audiences seeing this for the first time, that not only did the little kid die, she's eating her dad. And you can see that Helen just can't totally accept what's happened to her daughter. This, no matter how many times I see it, this still disturbs the hell out of me.
Well, there's the fear of youth as well. There's the fear of the generation coming up next and them being wrong.
It also has that pod people quality of this person that you know and love turning against you and not being the person that you thought they were in life. This was one of the last scenes shot, and actually, Marilyn Eastman wasn't present when Schoen was doing the stabbing. She's just stabbing into a pillow. So Schoen had no idea how effective this was till she saw the finished film, and she was a little shocked by that. She supposedly did have a lot of fun playing a monster, though.
So Barbara's whole arc is complete.
Mm-hmm. Except for this final cruel twist of fate.
No, yeah, well,
Yeah.
sort of.
Well, she said they had to wait for Johnny. They did. And I think she probably gets it the worst of anybody in this movie, which I think is really horrific. It must have been kind of strange considering we start the movie with Barbara I think an audience subconsciously would assume that she's going to survive to the end. So to suddenly have her check out before the ending must have been a shock. And the cemetery zombie's back with a haircut. I love this shot here of that right there, him holding her back. It's funny, when I first saw this shot in isolation, I thought she was alive and she was like trying to get in and the zombies were about to attack her. It freaked me out. It freaked me out even more seeing the real context of it.
You know, technically Harry was wrong. The basement would not have been the safest place because there was already somebody inside who was infected.
Yeah, it did make me wonder if Ben had followed his lead and they had gone to the cellar and then Karen had died and been infected,
right,
how would that have played out?
It also kind of speaks to the futility of holding some things off. Like, some things are just too strong to hold back, no matter what you do against it.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, what Tom had said about having the cellar be the fallback position would have been the better way to go. This guy really doesn't like this piano. Man, that's creepy. Imagine what would happen if that door pushed open on him. I know it's just like paint and chocolate sauce, but that's effectively really gruesome. You can see how angry he is. He wastes like 3 bullets on him.
Her daughter stabs her in the heart, which is just a part of growing up. Everyone injures their mom's heart.
See, that kind of plays into the whole idea of the zombie as this new generation, this new thing that's kind of taking over. The youth revolt. I like this weird drawn-out moment of him trying to find the gun again and just sort of like... kind of trying to figure out what to do with himself there.
Well, he's out of ideas.
He's also probably exhausted. These zombies must be like, we want to get in here? There's nothing in here. This party's dead anyway, let's go. I love that one hitting the floor with the table leg. And then to suddenly switch from that to these idyllic shots of the landscape, and everything's quiet and peaceful again.
Well, there are no humans.
Yet.
Right.
Here they come. Romero and the crew got a lot of cooperation from local people. Like, this was a radio station that just lent them their helicopter to do shots like this, and they got a lot of TV reporters who showed up. The National Guard's like, yeah, we'll give you some materials and stuff. The local police, they just got a ton of people who just wanted to help out. It really kind of adds to the scale of the movie. Okay, again, given some of the footage of like cops fighting civil rights activists and stuff, having the dogs in this scene, really uncomfortable.
Hey Vince, Al, you want to get about 4 or 5 men and a couple dogs? There's a house over here behind those trees. We want to go check it out. Right, you over here, Bill.
Yeah, Chief, we're going to stay with it till we meet up with the National Guard.
Where'd you get the coffee?
One of the volunteers.
That was an actual news cameraman behind him who just showed up, and they're like, here, you want to be in the movie and play the news cameraman? Great.
We'll probably get into Willard then. I guess you can go over there and meet the National Guard. Nick, you and the rest of these men want to come with me?
I also like the way the sheriff said thank you when he got the coffee. Like, yeah, I deserve this. Thank you. Fine.
Everything appears to be under control.
I wonder how you train a dog to sniff out zombies. Is it maybe one of those like corpse finding dogs?
Cadaver dogs?
Yeah.
Probably. I'd assume they had not stopped rotting.
I don't think so, because they kind of tend to get pretty disgusting as the series goes on. Is it weird? I kind of feel for the zombies at this point. We're not yet at bub levels of sympathy, but it does seem kind of horrific seeing these guys just chase them down and gun them down.
There is a level of intelligence there, so I do feel bad for them, but at the same time, how would they have handled the situation in a way that would have been good for both parties? I mean, is there some sort of agreement that can be reached between the zombies and the humans? Probably not.
Well, Day of the Dead with Bob suggested maybe you feed them, everything will be fine, but it's just, I think the turnaround of being outnumbered by these zombies, and that's horrific, and now the zombies are totally outnumbered by these guys with guns. I think it's also just that innate thing of, oh my god, they're just shooting people in the back. That's kind of horrific to watch.
We're never close enough to see that these people are zombies.
Yeah. Oh, great zombie fall coming up in this next one here. Boom! That was good.
Nick, Tony, Steve, you want to get out in that field and build me a bonfire?
Like he has this shock of seeing what happened to this place that they had held up in after everything, and then, oh, this happens.
You, drag that out of here and throw it on the fire. Nothing down here? All right, go ahead down and give him a hand.
Which again speaks to an invading army. Out of the two parties who were trying to wrestle power in that house, there's one person left who's just about to be taken over by a bigger force. So this is very military in a way. This is people creating nations and rules and then attacking each other. Without a care.
That last shot of Ben looking out at the posse, there was almost this sense of, oh, fuck, these are the people who are going to help me. And right before they shoot him, it felt kind of appropriate. Just this sort of, it was almost an eye roll look in a way.
These are the most chilling credits I've ever seen. This is really, really disturbing for me.
It really feels like either like newspaper photographs or even worse, those sort of stills that you'd see after a lynching.
Right. And that's what disturbs me about it.
Yeah, it's really tough to take. And this idea that they will never know, or you'd think they would because his corpse would still be warm.
No, they're burning the bodies.
But I mean, like, they're not even going to touch him. So they'll never know that they just gunned down this poor innocent dude.
Well, human.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I mean, do we consider what that posse is doing murder? Or do we consider it war?
I think it's war at that point.
Right.
With this one, it's just, this would be like manslaughter because they're just...
Well, it's an innocent party.
They're totally careless. Now, apparently there were a few alternate endings considered at the scripting stage. Russo wrote an ending where Barbara doesn't get pulled out of the house by Johnny. Ben actually brings her down into the basement, and after he gets shot, the sheriff goes down, sees Barbara, sees that she's crying, recognizes that she's alive, and actually saves her. And the last line would have him going, well, that's a shame. The only accident we've had today, with the implication maybe it wasn't. And then Carl Hardman had an idea of showing the posse driving off after this, and then there'd be one last shock of Karen, zombified Karen, stepping into frame to imply that they didn't get all of them and it's going to keep going. And supposedly Marilyn Eastman said that this went on, that actually after this shot of the bonfire, it went back to still pictures for a little while and it would have gone on a little longer, but...
I'm glad it didn't. Because when you break away from still photos to something as active as fire, that is your ending.
That ending, there was a lot of back and forth about whether to keep it or not. Like, Columbia nearly picked up the movie but said they would want them to change the ending. And I'm really glad they stuck with it and decided not to change that, because that cynicism of that ending is one of the things I think that really made it a classic. Just a couple other little things I want to note. Variety, after the initial release, this was their review of the movie. Until the Supreme Court establishes clear-cut guidelines for the pornography of violence, Night of the Living Dead will serve nicely as an outer limit definition by example.
So they're basically saying it's torture porn like 40 years before what we now call torture
Exactly.
porn. So, I mean, that just tells me that in another 20 or so years, what we viewed as torture porn will be art.
I think so many people were turned off by the kind of upper limit of violence that they just turned off their brains to everything else this movie is doing and how brilliant it is. It is one of my favorite horror movies, definitely. It's in like my top 5 of all-time favorite movies, and Romero is my favorite director, so this started off. It's like this and Dawn are very close, but they both kind of accomplish different things. All right, I have to ask, do you have a favorite scene from the movie?
This is a movie that I feel like doesn't really have scenes because of the nature of the chamber piece. But if there's a section of it that I liked the best, it really is Barbara tracing that lace, because I really understand what's happening with her. And the actress is doing so little when it comes to movements, but she's acting all of this emotion into just tracing one finger. It's amazing.
I got to go with that initial moment after the power goes out and the zombies are starting their attack, and you just have that amazing series of close-ups of everybody looking around in horror with that great film noir black shadowy lighting. That's just such a beautiful montage in that moment. All right, anything else to say about Night of the Living Dead?
Go see the rest of the series.
Absolutely. And check out the remake. The remake is actually really solid and has some great performances from Tony Todd and Patricia Tallman and a really cool different take on Barbara. All right, that ends the commentary, but not the discussion. If you'd like to have your say about Night of the Living Dead or feel that we missed something, check out the comments section for this episode on cinemaspection.com and start talking. Email your comments, complaints, questions, and suggestions to cinemaspection@gmail.com. You can also like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter @CinemaSpection. For our personal accounts, I'm at Timosaurus R.
I'm at Hagatha Luz.
We're also on Instagram under CinemaSpection. Our show is available on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and Amazon Music, so if you like what you hear, please subscribe, and if you have a moment, please leave us a review there. We appreciate your feedback, and your reviews help increase our visibility. We're also now part of the Fireside Alliance podcast network. Check out some of the other great shows in the network at www.firesidealliance.com and join our Discord. We'll be back to discuss another movie next time. Until then, thanks for listening, and remember to keep watching closely. There's more to a movie than what's on the screen.